Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Deep Cuts Live. I'm excited about every interview, but I'm excited about today's interview because it's always fun to speak to someone that actually you don't know. Because sometimes I have to play like I have not asked these people 20 questions before, and with today's guest, I really not have not asked them any questions because I've never spoken to them before. So your first time it might be your first time learning about today's guest, and it'll be my first time learning about them as well. So I'm going to bring on our guest, who is Alex Spencer from AS Reserve.
Hey, how's it going?
Alex, how are you?
Great, man. Great. How are you?
I'm doing well. Like I said, it's always fun to have people on who have been on before, but I think it's a little bit more fun for me to have somebody who has I have not interacted with as much, just because I get to learn new stuff and I don't have to play stupid like I don't know some of these questions that I've asked these people 50
Right.
billion times. So thank you for
Right.
coming on today.
Well, thanks for having me, man.
Yeah, like I said, I found out about you through small batch cigars, and I think our mutual friend Ben has been hyping you up with her work, and I saw that Instagram live that you and her did. For those of you who don't know, sisters, and Ben is just a great Instagram person, but she's knowledgeable about cigars. So she always brings up some very interesting people to the forefront. So I was kind of looking and I was like, for whatever reason, I've never heard of this brand before. And I was like, this is somebody that I want to get to know even more. So I'm excited about the hour that we get to spend together and just learning more about your brand, because I've gone through my whole Barbara Walters today and have seen some of your other interviews and watched some other stuff. So I feel like we have a lot that we can dive into today.
Okay. Okay. Let's shoot.
Well, I always like to start at the beginning. So I know from listening to your Instagram live with Ben that uh, you did not start off in the cigar industry. So tell people about what your background is and how you kind of landed into cigars.
Okay. Well, um, I have a master's in business administration from 2012. During that time, I worked for Wright Patterson Air Force Base in the Air Force for roughly 3 years. During that time, I did defense contracting, contract negotiating. We bought everything from satellites uh, to pilots' helmets to flight simulators and Boeing jets. So did a little bit of a lot there. Worked with a couple of $100 million worth of business
Mm-hmm.
there. Uh, I left. I went on to pursue entrepreneurship. It was an amazing kind of jump, a leap. I really felt like I was a square peg in a round hole, trying to really figure out who I was. And honestly, I needed a fresh start after dealing with the loss of my father. And so I just kind of didn't really feel the 9 to 5 anymore. So jumped in early, got into a lot of consulting, helping small businesses develop things of that nature. I owned a hair salon, a natural hair salon where we did the braids and the afros and all that stuff. And we brought that concept down from the Northeast, New York, Philadelphia. So that was a major thing at the time, still is today. While doing that, I got into manufacturing, started to create products to put on shelves across the United States. And that was really the time where I learned process, pricing, not just from the contract negotiating side, but from my own side in business, dealing with retailers, learning how the business of wholesaling, all of these things really sort of made a bed for, what I was to end up doing, which was cigars. So that's a little bit of the background.
I always like to ask, and you kind of touched on this just now, but how did all these other jobs, I guess your 9 to 5s before you went, you flew to Coop and went out on your own. How did those jobs kind of help set you up for owning your own cigar brand?
Uh, that's a good question. What I found was that um, in business, whether it is in finance, which is where I originally started in banking, to the contract negotiating on a team, to manufacturing, you deal with various levels of success. And in those various levels of success, the way the people at the top treat success is oftentimes pretty similar. Um, we as a culture are either time rich and financially, let's say, on pause,
Mm-hmm.
or we are fruitful financially, but our time is the restraint. So what I found is that the people that were at the top, they didn't talk about the work that was right in front of them. They didn't talk about the employees that they needed to hire or even fire. They talked about ideas. And oftentimes they would sit amongst each other and bring up various ideas about how to change society. And they often did that over scotch or bourbon and a cigar, or during golf or something like that. I always say I sucked at golf. And so my route was cigars, but I chose it because at that time, it, it was impossible for me to get into those rooms where real decision makers made decisions. So my impression was, if I can't get in the room, I need to create something that will put me in the room. Cigars was that thing, and so I chose it, and it led me on to a roller coaster ride that I'm grateful for.
I think that's so interesting, like observant of what the people at the top were talking about or what they did in their actions, and just, I mean, I guess I want to know, how are you going to keep yourself from becoming just one of those people who are, an idea person rather than just being about actions? And I ask that because a lot of times people do get kind of wrapped up in this idea, and kind of the lower you are, the more work you tend to do. And then the higher you get, the less hands on you are, and you kind of lose touch with what, you started off with.
Yeah. Well, I, being in either position has its disadvantages. People that are ideators or dreamers oftentimes don't have the personal resource to get dirty, right? This is why they hire, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, they're great at envisioning, and they often need people to execute. People at the that are I won't say at the bottom, but people that are not at that level tend to be executors. They have a vision, but it's within the symmetry of that flow of business, and they can get on the ground and they can communicate within their rings. And for me, you asked the question, how do I keep from becoming that person? Uh, I've always been a dreamer. It's the thing that has been a gut skill of mine. It's instinctual, and it allows me to see this. This is my personal quote: "See beyond sight." Where I'm from, it's very difficult to see beyond the street corner. It's very difficult to see beyond uh, the issues that are swirling around you constantly, right? Whether it's hunger or it's crime, drug infestation, things like that I grew up around.
Mm-hmm.
What gave me the opportunity was college. It was all of these things that really opened my world so that I could see bigger than what was in front of me. So dreaming is not necessarily a negative connotation to me. But what I will say is, if you give me the vision, I will envision the work. I never get caught up in this idea of, wow, it'd be nice to have, you know, 5 bed, 5 bath mansion in Malibu, or it'd be nice to have those $700 Yeezys, right? Or
Right.
whatever people dream of. I always envision the work. If I can see it, then I can execute, and it becomes real. So to see it in my world, thoughts are things. They are physical. When I speak it, they turn into action oriented visions, and then when I execute, it opens up a whole nother door, which has allowed me to be successful in this industry.
And I think that's, interesting because whenever I talk to people who decide to embrace entrepreneurship, they always kind of say what you just said. They always start off with this idea of what they want out of it or at the end. And it's like material
Yes.
stuff. And it drives me crazy because they say, I want to make $1 million. And I'm like, why? And
Yeah,
they just think
why?
it's a crazy question. And they're just like, but why wouldn't I? I was like, but what were you going to do with the
Yeah.
$1 million once you make it?
Well, yeah. And I mean, look, if you have an issue with money, having $1 million doesn't change the issue that you have with money. Uh, I typically work backwards. So I see the end to the means first, and then I back into, this solution or the problem.
Mhm.
So I have to see both sides of it. And it allows me, once I have my restraints, then I can operate freely because I know where the walls are. So it's always been something that I've always had the skill of. I've always utilized, and I learned more of when I reached graduate school and things of that nature, and got put on projects at work. But to do it for myself makes $1 in entrepreneurship feel like $1,000 as a W-2 at an organization. So I just work. I enjoy having the freedom and doing what I love.
And I think that's another, just important part is making that transition from, like you said, being part of a collective in a working situation to being the individual, and it's like your business, and it kind of does change your perspective. Like, what was that transition like when you finally did decide that you wanted to become an entrepreneur, you wanted to start your own business? What 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 was going through your mind? Like I said, what was the kind of psychological shift that you had to make in order to make it all work?
Yeah, uh, it was absolute fear. I'm going to be honest. It was absolute fear. You Until your back is truly against the wall, and until you're trying to understand where that next meal is coming from, or how you're going to pay bills, or you know who can help you in the event that your idea fails,
Hmm.
or you know I don't operate in plan B's. So a plan B for me is making sure that the plan A works. If I have a plan B, then I am preparing myself for plan A to fail. So I don't dabble my toe in the water, I cannonball. If we're gonna fail, we're gonna fail fast. We're gonna fail forward, and we're gonna learn, from the experience. A great tool for me that I had though growing up was my parents being entrepreneurs. I started carrying buckets of paint for them at 3 years old. My parents painted fast food stations, gas stations, mailboxes. They got various contracts throughout the United States. And, I moved around a lot. I saw a lot of things. And prior to my dad passing, he always said, I want you guys to be better than me. So learn from my mistakes, go to school, and educate yourself on how to avoid the pitfalls of business. Another funny uh, thing I always think about whenever I'm kind of stressed, we would come home, me and my brothers and sisters, there were 8 of us. And, as each one of us grew up and got old enough to work, we'd come home after we lost a job or, we quit, whatever. And my parents would go out and go buy a cake, and they would have Happy Entrepreneurs Day put on the cake. My dad made up some funny, it sounded like happy birthday, but it wasn't. But these are the experiences I have. So writing proposals, learning how to put images to a statement and balance sheets and, all of these things in order to get business and maintain your own business. I had the experience of. So going into cigars at 35 ish, I had already knew how to put, LLCs and things like that together because I saw it at such a young age.
But I think
So,
that,
yeah.
also important because you had obviously your parents kind of taught you that entrepreneurship. Do you think if they had not taught you that entrepreneurship and what, and that mentality of, yeah, you quit or that job didn't go as well, but we're going to celebrate it anyway. You need to get up and the next day and, get back to it. If they hadn't taught you that, do you think you would have learned that in school or would you have learned that on your own?
Uh, Life has a funny way of always bringing you to the place you need to be.
Mhm.
Even in failure or in loss, we always kind of glean and say, wow, 10 years ago, I would have never thought I'd be doing this. Um, I can't say those moments, if they didn't happen, would I be here? I would say that the path would certainly have been the much more longer path. I probably would have stopped so many times. I would have been a lot more fearful. And, it's a DNA thing. Parents, and I tell people this all the time, it's like as a parent, you're writing the code for the DNA for your child. Every decision you make, every outburst, every celebration, all the sadness, your fears, all of these things are like downloaded into your children upon the time that they're born. Uh, I tell people the same thing is if you've ever seen a child that is like ghostly afraid of a cop, right? They're scared. They've never seen one, but they're scared. And it's like, how do you know to be scared? Right? And other children are like, you know.
Yeah.
And so it's the same thing in entrepreneurship where, you know, if it's something that has not been programmed into you, then it doesn't mean you can't do it, but it just means that your experiences may not be there. You may be the first person in your family, and everything behind you is now downloaded, But for me, it's always been there. I don't know what life is like without it. So it just kind of, I don't know, it's just a way of life for me.
And when you decided to get into the cigar business, who did you share that idea with first, or who did you kind of tell, like, "Hey, this is what's going to happen"? And what was their reaction?
I don't. I think I shared it with my ex-wife. She saw me enjoying cigars from the very beginning, and so she thought it was cool because I I found mentors. I think the downside of it that she felt was that I was just spending a great deal of money. Like, okay, Alex, I'm glad you found people that you can talk to now, but you're spending $5,000-$10,000 a year, and I think there's other ways you can spend that. So she gave me these set of challenges over the course of a year. It's like, great, you found mentors, but you're spending money. How about you find a way to make it cheaper? Then it went to, great, you found a way to make it cheaper, but now you're smoking twice as much. And then the last one was, you need to turn this into a business, or you can't smoke anymore because you're just spending money. So I think without that initially, I I would have I would have probably done it, but it would have been over a longer period of time. She really put fire under me to execute, and so I give her kudos for that. But everybody else, uh, the cigar industry hasn't been in my city in almost 100 years. It's been like 70 years plus. So to come back and say, "Hey, I want to start a cigar company," it's like the room stops and stares at you and says, "Man, who's doing that?"
Mm-hmm.
But I had a lot of people that supported me, and at that time, I was like, "Look, I'd give anything not to have to go back to a 9 to 5. So I'm going to do whatever I got to do to make this work." So I didn't really listen to the haters or to the doubters or naysayers. I just went after it.
And I think that's a great mentality to have, because you're not always going to have full support from or understanding from everybody, because
Yeah,
they don't get what it's your passion. It's not their passion.
yeah, yeah. And we all have to learn that. I think we go from I to to we over this long course of time, and the I is is the ego, but it cares about what others think,
Mm-hmm.
and it's almost in a selfish way. You kind of want to be looked at and revered, and and thought of in great ways, and then life hits you, right? And when life hits you, the things that you cared about really don't matter, and what people think really don't matter. Because you can't eat what people think. You can't pay bills with what people think. And you just have to determine what's important to you. And if you have children, you wake up every morning and you look at your kids and you think, they didn't ask to be here, and they're hungry, so I need to figure something out. And I think the best position to be in is in a place where you're somewhere between hope and fear. Hope is the great uh, deal deal maker. Excuse me. And fear is the ultimate deal breaker. And so somewhere in between there, you have to determine who you are and pick a side. And for me, I just got off the pot and just said, hey, let's go do it.
So when you finally decided to launch your company, how did you get started? Like, what was the first steps that you had to take to really get a product from concept to final
Yeah.
product in your hand?
Well, the first thing was the concept. If I can't do what I'm trying to accomplish to the best of my abilities, I don't want to do it. Right? I don't want to half-ass myself or the people that support me. And most importantly, at that time, it was, you know, after my father's death, death numbs you, right? It puts you in a very numb place where um, you almost become recklessly fearless, because you realize time, you don't have the luxury of time. So you have to go after it. And that really shaped my world. And so I thought about concept first. And I went through first, oh, well, I want to make something cool for the cool people. Then it was like, I want to make something badass, And that's not even me. That's not even me. Like, so now you got to determine, Alex, who are you?
Mm-hmm.
Because at the end of the day, you have to be able to connect with people on this wavelength that is authentic and that's real. And so I thought back to things my dad used to say, and going through that rough patch in my life, I started to have these beautiful, positive memories of family, of friends, really of my mother and father. And, he used to tell us stories about, African kings and queens, people that were great. He hated these stories of, I won't say hate, he really disliked these stories of, you know, just slavery. Just your life started as a slave. No, it didn't. Your story started way before that. And here are all of these great people in history that you can look at. And one of them was Mansa Musa. And, he used to tell us these stories before bed, and once I latched onto that, I just did about 6 months of research. I just essentially started reading his story and writing my father this open letter to my father. We used to think my dad lied all the time. He used to tell these grand stories, like these big fish stories. And he was telling the truth the whole time. I'm like, oh my God, my dad was a genius, man. And so as both stories unraveled, what I ended up having was an open letter to my dad. We all want to show our parents in some way or form that what they taught us meant something,
Mm-hmm.
and that we accomplished what they set out there. We are the result of their hopes and dreams. And so the Mansa cigar is the result of all of these past memories that were passed to me through these interactions with my father. And so it's really an open letter, is what it is.
And I think that's interesting because I like to read, and it took all the events of 2020 and all these great books that kind of came out of that era, which is shockingly a lot of books that kind of explore race, that I was like, here I am, history was always one of my favorite subjects in school. And
Yeah.
yet we never were taught half the things about Black history that
Yes.
we were about other history. And there's some
Yes.
books now that are out there that explore that subject. And I always tell people, like, there's I think it's 400 years that came out like last year or so. It's like an anthology of just Black history, like 400 years of Black American history.
Right.
And I always tell people, read that book. It's great, and you learn. So the fact that you were able to, that your father and your parents taught you that, I think is just so great, because, like I said, you don't always get that. Um, we don't always get that history, and
Yeah.
and then for you to kind of take that history and like make it into a cigar, and I think it's just what makes your company so
Wow.
unique and different, because it is special, and we don't hear stories like that. Like when I hear about your cigars, like the first time when I was looking at the story about Mansa and all that, it was the first time I ever heard about it. And
Wow.
maybe it's because I live in the South, and our
Yeah.
history is completely maybe a little bit different than what other parts of the country and the world are taught. But it was just
Yeah.
like, to me, that this has been an interesting subject for me, because it's something that I've personally have been looking into more in the past two or so years, of just kind of learning more about real history, like the full scope, not just like a
Yes.
limited scope.
Yes. Yeah. There's so much information in the world. I mean, when we're in high school, we're learning about history, and well, the Visigoths and the Vikings and the Dravidians and and they give these, they talk about groups of people and their migration, but they don't tell you who these people are. There's
Right.
not really a context. And that's the research that you have to do on your own, which is the reason why a lot of people just didn't care about history in grade school, because it's like, what do these people have to do with me?
Exactly. You're like, like Vikings, like who cares?
Yeah, who cares?
Who cares? Like Greek knowledge, like what does that matter to me now?
Yeah, why does that matter? And okay, he looked like Thor, that's great, but that's not the truth. We when we break down, you know, information into parts that we can properly absorb because we know how it affects us, then we're able to take that information and really make it personal and shape it and then shape our world. And that, to me, is what made my father so special, is because he really took these ideas that were so far fetched and brought them home and helped me to understand life in a totally different array of colors. And, I'm so grateful for that. And my mother, too. I mean, she was definitely nurturing. There will be something probably in the future cigar related to her. But for this first cigar, I just wanted to celebrate his life. And, I'm excited that the world has held on to it the way I held on to it for 35 years. And I'm finally getting to show everybody how passionate I am about cigars with it. So,
And what's been the reception to Mansa? Because I was reading that you had some cigar lounges reach out to you, say they wanted to buy big quantities of the cigar after they heard about it, and so on and so forth. So what has been kind of like the public's response to this cigar? How did that make you feel?
uh, honestly, Erica Badu said it. I'm an artist and I'm sensitive about my shit. Excuse my language.
Okay.
Uh, I look at, I'll start from the beginning. I look at the creation of the Mansa as a depiction of history with art. It's this art history hodgepodge, and we're taking the art form of cigars and we're really creating something beautiful. Um, the world has really take in this thing that I was very sensitive about, showing, because the world can be an ugly place, when it comes to taking your idea and exposing it. And so I was initially very fearful of that. Um, but they've gravitated to it, they have nurtured it, and they've given it a life of its own. And when that happened, man, I honestly just broke down and cried, man. I did not fathom in my wildest of dreams that something like this would happen, let alone happen to me. We talk about it all the time of, man, when I do this and do that, I'm gonna, you know, yeah, but that's in your head. When it
Mm-hmm.
really happens, I mean, just about the only thing you can do is thank God, man, because it flows through me, not from me. And I'm not going to claim the source of any of it. I give it all to God, first and foremost. And I'm just grateful that, that the Most High chose me as the vessel for it. So uh, I just broke down and cried when it all happened. And it was years of envisioning the light in complete darkness. The struggle of trying to create something with little to no means. Uh, you know, at the time, I mean, I'm like trying to pinch pennies and rub them together to get this idea off the ground. And to not really have the believers to just come from very little and remember my father through this whole thing. This was the way I talked to him. This was epic for me because I spent so many nights, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning, just staring at the stars, wondering, God, how? And it manifested into something that has moved lightning speed. And I just want to continue to keep doing great work. And, we'll see what comes next.
When you say that, I think for me, that's why I'm not a big fan of cigar ratings, because I feel like they're rating it based on their palate, and how
Yeah.
somebody else might like a cigar is completely different from how I might like a cigar, and vice versa. And
Yeah.
I think, the story that you just told, you can't get that. I mean, it's an important part of the cigar, but it's a
It's
story.
the part of the cigar.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like the one ingredient that you won't taste. I mean, you might be able to taste some of it, but you're not going to get that in a note or whatever. And so
Yeah.
ratings to me have, and that's the one, my pet peeve about the industry, is that it's gotten so narrow minded about, the whole industry is all about ratings and getting a coveted 93 or 90 whatever, or
Yeah.
90. And then it's like everybody chases that. They want to get that 90 rate. They want to get into cigar aficionado. They want to, be named cigar of the year, and they made it. But it's like, what's your story behind the cigar? And I think, like I said, what you just told for the last 38 minutes is a powerful story that goes into how the cigar was made. And yet nobody, lots of the media today aren't interested in the story. They're just interested in the product,
Yeah.
getting a sample, smoking it, and then making themselves kind of feel special by
Yes.
trying to put a number to something that, I mean, even if you got a 93 rating from somebody, I'm sure you'll look at it and be like, but this is like 100%, 100%
Yes.
star. This, I
Yeah.
didn't go
Yeah.
in and think I'm going to get, for ratings, but I would just, for me, if I had a cigar out there, it will make me mad. I think that was the one part I would put me in to handle, is like going like, okay, but you missed the whole point of the cigar. You didn't get the story or whatever. You're just
Yeah.
talking about notes and how, this or that. It's just a really strange part of the industry that on the media side, I've yet to understand.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, people. people, ask me, about the flavor profiles and the, all of the flavors and this is something that people don't really get from me, but all of the flavors that you're supposed to taste in the cigar are original African based flavors. Whether it's the cacao
Mm-hmm.
or this chocolate or coffee. You know, uh, the cigar was meant to truly represent Africa and to represent, the culture. So everybody says, well, what does Mansa Musa's gold have to do with the cigar? And I'm like, well, back then it was his wealth was the gold, but the gold today is these stories that we share. Like we're sharing them right now, and the only difference is that during his time, the gold devalued because he gave away so much. The gold today actually increases in value because blades sharpen blades, and at the end of the day, we can walk away with insight, more information than we had before, and we're all better off because of it. I, you know, I scores are important to the extent that business needs to happen, but I want people to know how passionate I am about this. Where ASR, what ASR, and I, what it stands for. This badge of honor, these blood, sweat, and tears. These 5 years of hopes, dreams, and wishes, overcoming fear and being emotionally, mentally stagnant, numb through death, and really being uh, sculpted and built by the fire, literally. And the cigar, I want it to be special for people because I want people to see a part of themselves in the cigar.
Mm-hmm.
We initially it's race is important when it comes to the cigar because there's not many of us in the industry as African Americans, but it's not necessarily just about being black. You know, we all struggle. We're all different races. We all have pains. We all overcome. And I want everybody that tries a cigar to hopefully find themselves a part in that and know that we're all destined for greatness if we choose it. But we first have to go through the fire, and if I'm able to do that with one person, I feel like I've done my job. So like I said, I'm grateful, man. I'm super grateful.
Yeah, and that goes on to I was reading the story that the Cincinnati Enquirer, or I think that's what they did on you, and
Yeah.
I was reading that part, and I kind of stopped at that part of the article because you had said, but I don't want to necessarily be seen as a black owned brand. I want to be seen as a great brand that happens to be black owned, and I thought
Yes.
that was a kind of like a one of those standout, as Oprah would call it, aha moments from that interview that you did with them because like you said, there aren't a lot of black owned brands in the cigar industry, at least. But to be seen beyond that, I think is
Yeah.
important.
I mean, if we here's the problem. The love of cigars is multifaceted, right? It's all different races enjoy cigars. But the minute that you keep doing this keep away game with, well, I'm black, I'm black, I'm black. You don't have to say that, right? We have a permanent tattoo. You don't have to say that. right? You can say, I'm a great cigar, a great cigar. Why don't you try it? And I think that approach is what, when you start to give race attributes to a product, then you start to raise walls, and it makes everybody feel like, well, they can't be involved in the love or the passion of that product or service. And it's important, in our culture, race is important, but it's not the only thing that we are. We have, every other thing to, attribute to talk about too. I mean, when you talk about your love of bourbon, it's like, well, we all love bourbon. We all love cigars. We all love golf. We all, so I'd rather go into it saying we than to put up dividers to talk about who isn't this or who isn't that. That doesn't matter to me. It's about the love. And I don't care if you're green. If you love cigars, in bourbon, let's sit down and have a good conversation and enjoy cigars together.
Yeah, and I think sometimes too the pitfall of using race is that you're dealing with somebody else's biases that they're coming into the situation with. So if you say you're a black-owned brand and they have some negative connotations of what
That's right.
black business is, or like what a black entrepreneur is, they're like, oh God,
Yeah. Oh
all
God.
of a sudden you're having to work not only the regular obstacles of business, but
Yeah,
then
you
also
just
you've
created your own
overcome.
obstacle, and
Right.
then you have to talk about why that doesn't mean that and this and that.
Exactly.
Look, I I understand. Of all people, I understand there are hurdles that still exist in the industry, in any industry, but the only way we can truly move ahead is when we stop dividing each other from each other. There's only one race. There's a human race. We all participate in it, in this life, and we all experience the same things. So the moment that we start dividing is the moment that it all falls apart, and I just won't have a part in that. I won't. Some of the greatest people that have helped me have been people of all other races. That
Mhm.
doesn't mean that, being black negates them. I want people to come together. I mean, it's enough of this divisiveness in the world that I just don't want it anymore.
So when you look ahead for your business for AS Reserve, what do you envision? Like I know people like to use the like 5-year term or 10-year plan, but where do you see yourself a year from now? Or where do you see yourself 3 years from now? That short time span.
Uh, what what I would like to do initially, I think it's easy to say, um, I enjoy the art of storytelling. You know, uh, to me, it's probably one of the most beautiful forms of communication. You can learn history, you can learn valuable life lessons, all of these things. So I see more cigars involving the Mansa in the next year or two. Uh, Matter of fact, there will be. I'm excited to bring that to the forefront, to tell more stories. It's There's a lot. Just put it that way. I'm not going to give away the goods, but there's a lot to tell, not just about Mansa Musa. Uh, we're talking about dynasties. So I see that coming. I see I see a lot of the stories being told from the ASR, and so uh, I want it to be rich in history, rich in tradition, and valuing the people that rolled the cigar that A, look like me, but B, have not been brought to the forefront of this entire industry over the 200, 300, 400 years. So I want to bring that to the forefront, but then I also want to bring in other cultures. Talk about other things that are important to life as we know it today, and just some of those valuable lessons that I was taught as a kid. I'll bring those back too.
What have you learned about yourself since you started AS Reserve?
Man, that was a great question. I've learned that there's so much more to what plays in your success, and also in the demise of a brand. I've learned that um, sales are great. We talk about the bottom line in business all the time, all of these things, but the mark that you leave on people, I think, is just as great. Patience. I've learned the value of patience and processes in this industry. I mean, we're dealing with something that grows out of the soil. It takes time, and to bring ideas or concepts to the forefront, it's not an overnight thing. Um, Working with small manufacturers to now a larger manufacturer is a world of difference, and uh, I'm still learning about that, and just about building quality relationships, and being able to give to those relationships as much as you receive. We all want to have mentors and people we can take from, but success is very at the top is very lonely.
Mhm.
There's a lot of people that are successful, but you know they don't operate in large swaths of people. They're focused, and so to be able to build with a group of people you can trust, that you can add value to, and that you can receive value from, to establish a good name in the industry, build rapport, and be patient. Like, these are all things that I've had to learn, and I've learned more about myself through.
Somebody comes to you and they say, I want to be an entrepreneur. I want to go out on my own and start my own business. It's not necessarily cigars. What advice do you give to that person? How should they get started?
Hmm. I've heard this question from someone before. When I started, I always tell people I didn't know what I didn't know. Um, and I always look for people that would quote, help me see around the corner, um, and not fall into this path that didn't take me anywhere. If you, and this is not you, but anyone, if you truly want to create something, you know, this freestyle Jay-Z not writing things down doesn't work. Okay, you have to write things down. Um, Everybody wants to do five things at once. No. All right. That's the quickest way to not accomplishing anything. I think, not trying to, well, let me clarify the way I'm saying this. Take one foot in front of the other, one step at a time. Don't try to conquer three, four, five, 10 things all at once. Be patient with yourself. Absorb information when it's necessary and when it's given. Um, Trademarking, very important. Very important. Trademarking.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Everybody's going to tell you what they think you should do, and only you know what you should do and what's in your heart. You know, um, everybody's told me 1,000 different ways of, you should, it'll be better if you, and I'm like, man, you guys aren't putting food on my table.
I've heard that before. like,
Yeah, you're not, you're not paying a bill.
like lots of ideas, not enough.
Yeah, I'm
Funding
like,
the
you know what?
not any money.
A guy, when I first started, God loved me when I first started. He said, hey man, these cigars are good, but you don't have bands on them. And I said, yeah, I know. He said, man, you need to get bands on these. That's the only way they're going to sell. I said, yeah, I know that. And he said, so are you going to get bands on them? I said, are you going to give me $10,000? He said, no. I said, so I guess we're just at an impasse, huh? You know, and that's the way the world works. People, there are good people in this world, but there are people that will abuse their seat at your table,
Mm-hmm.
and you have to learn how to cut people off, especially people that aren't adding value to your life. So there's a lot of things, and you know, every, when you start a business, everybody else magically is starting one at the same time. Uh, this is not a race; it's a marathon. And the goal is to better your best, not to better someone else's best. So it's to focus on what it is that you have to do, and always know that there's something to be sacrificed, whether it's your time, your money, your effort, your television time,
Mm-hmm.
uh
Your sanity.
maybe your job.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, these things happen, and so um you got to determine what's more important. So those are some things I will say. As always, I always leave people with this. Believe, somebody said to me, Alex, I am harder on myself than anybody else. That way I know, I can handle the stress. And I'm like, that's stupid. That's stupid. So let me get this straight. You are your biggest hater. And somehow that's supposed to help you overcome yourself. That doesn't sound smart. We need to be our biggest fans, our biggest supporters, our biggest cheerleaders, our biggest advocates, because the world is going to tell you no. Your job is not to also stand in with the crowd and heckle yourself, but to be the wind at your back. So um the beating yourself up thing, not cool. We got to
Yeah.
get away from that. So those are some things that I would probably say.
I feel like we got like a real counseling session today. interview.
Man, we it's natural. You know what I mean? Um, I I want it did this the reason why it probably feels like that is because we all do these things to ourselves.
Mhm.
I had to learn how to stop saying the word broke. Right. I'm broke. Can't go out. I had to stop, because broke is being broken. You can't put it back together. Humpty Dumpty.
Mhm.
I may be financially indisposed right now. I can't do it temporarily, financially on pause. You have to learn better ways to say things because our words are so powerful that they actually control ourselves, right? This fight or flight thing. When you put these thoughts out into the world, your body does not know how to differentiate between what's real and what's not, what's
All
a
right.
joke and what's serious. So if you constantly say negative things to yourself, then your mind, your spirit, it all focuses on it. So I had to go through that whole thing in the process of the Mansa, and in the process of ASR and everything else, and leaving the job when I first started, all of these things. So when I learned how to properly communicate with myself, then I was able to easily squash the doubt, the negativity that was around me, because I had filled myself up with so much light, the darkness couldn't penetrate. But this all kind of comes from stories of my dad, and my mother being the nurturer that she was. So yeah, man. I mean, it's things you learn along the way.
Yeah.
We all learn it, but it's the path we take and how we apply the information. So hopefully anybody watching has got something out of this.
I definitely think they will. And if they don't, then there's something definitely definitely wrong because I think there's something
Yeah,
for
yeah,
everybody. Before we go for today, I know that there are going to be some people who are going to be listening to this rather than watching. So could you give them whatever website and social media they need to follow in order to
yeah,
keep with you and what
yeah.
you're doing?
Okay. Well, I mean, first and foremost, I do most of my social media damage on IG. You can find me on IG at AS Reserve. A as in Alex, S as in Spencer. Reserve. Uh, Add me, follow me, all that stuff. We do follow for follow, all that cool stuff. And then if you're on Facebook, um, it's ASR Cigar. So those are my two main platforms. It seems like the entire world's on those two platforms.
Mhm.
Um, I'm still learning how to use TikTok. You're not going to find me dancing on there. Uh, that's not going to happen. But other than that, if you want to find, cigars, or, you want to go online and make a 5-pack purchase or buy a box, definitely go to boutiquesmoke.com. You can look me up on the site and make your purchase. We ship all around the world. If you're in the military, we will deliver it to your base, worry free. So just thanks in advance for the support, guys, and I look forward to communicating with you on social media.
I want to thank you for being a guest today on Deep Cuts, and want to thank everyone who has been watching or is listening to this in playback mode. If you are following on Facebook or YouTube or Twitter, be sure to hit the like button or the follow button to be notified of anytime we come live with new content and interviews. We have two new interviews coming up next week. We have Jeremy Costagli on Tuesday and Jonas Santana from Blackbird on Thursday. And if you want to watch any of the other Deep Cuts interviews that we have done, you can look at deepcutslive.com as all the other interviews and some other news items that you might be interested in. And I want to thank our guest one more time, Alex, for coming on today. We'll have to have you back at some point soon to just come on and give us more wisdom and feedback, and especially when you release your new products. We'll have
Oh yeah. Yeah, I'll be here, man. I will. You'll be the first person I talk to, definitely.
awesome. Well, thank you again, and to everyone, a good night, a good morning if you're listening to this in the morning. Thank you for joining us, and see you back here next week.
Peace.
Peace.